Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today. Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how so many jobs now in the Western world, particularly in the government and the high-tech industries and the social service industries, how many of these jobs are created and given to women, disproportionately to women. And these jobs are do-nothing jobs. They're not real jobs. They're pretend jobs. They're where women can pretend to be important, to be busy, to be officious, and so on, but where they don't really do anything. They have endless, pointless meetings. They go from one meeting room to the other. It's all girls together, and they're all trying so hard to be inclusive and so on. But really, they do nothing more than sort of just engage in endless moral posturing. They're outraged at the thought of having to do work, and even more outraged at having to be accountable. Now, when I first started work, women, it was very rare to find women in supervisory positions unless it was a job supervising other women. But say like, I don't know, in a grocery store, all the women working on the checkout would have a woman supervisor. So but when I started working, professionally and came out of college jobs and summer holiday type jobs, then women only were receptionists and typists, word processor operators, and so on. And that was pretty much, I mean, so again, school teachers and so on, but that was pretty much the extent of it. Those were, for the most part, real jobs where women did real work, and sitting on a front desk answering the phone all day, that would be, apart from being mind-numbing, that wouldn't be the easiest job in the world. But that was really the jobs that women had. I remember going into a small grocery store years ago, and I'd have been young, maybe 20 or something at the time. And the assistant manager in this again, small grocery store, so it was hardly an important job. The assistant manager was a woman. I remember being quite surprised by that. Now, the idea of putting women in managerial roles seemed to come along, but it was an ideological thing. It was never a thing of they'll be the best person or the best way. It was always ideological. And I worked at a company where I was briefly assigned to look after the trainees in the company, and the cadet trainee program was quite a serious program. You had to pass tests and exams and oral and practical and this sort of thing. Anyway, I was put in there. I'm still quite young, maybe 22, maybe not even that old, and I was only filling in while somebody was away on vacation. But at that time, I can't remember who he was, like the executive vice president or whoever it was, came around and said, "Look, Billy Bob, the company's got a program where we want more women in cadet traineeship positions. So you're going to be marking their tests and their exams and grading them, and that's so I want you to make sure that all the women pass." Now, I interpreted that, and I've mentioned this in a previous video, but I interpreted it as meaning I should make sure that the girls were doing their work and were right on the ball and focused. And so that's what I kind of meant. I didn't realize what he meant was that we just want the women to pass. So you're going to pass them no matter how bad they are, no matter how bad their grades are, whether they've done any work or not, you're going to pass them, and that's it. That's how it's going to be. And that was my first taste of ideology in relation to bringing women into the workforce. Now, the activists would say, well, you have to do that because the patriarchy is so wicked and evil and bad and Nazi and fascist and swastika that women won't be graded fairly. They'll be graded harshly and thus will never pass because of this miasma of the evil patriarchy. That was quite the opposite in my case. I didn't really care one way or another. If they passed, they passed. That was good enough for me. And so when it came to the exam time, they had to hand in their papers. Most of the women either didn't hand them in, or they were such poor quality that you couldn't So I thought, but with what the CEO wants, I handed the papers back to the girls, and I gave the girls, say, look, it's Friday, your paper's due. I'll still accept it from you on Monday, so you've got the whole weekend to do it. And the boys, or the young men, they were a little bit, well, why are they getting these extra breaks? Why can't we have more time? And so on. So that it didn't go down too well. Understandably, by the way, it didn't go down too well. So the women got the women who had put in such a crap paper that I gave it back to them. So all the women had the weekend to do it. And still there were women who didn't do it. Just, yeah, look, my boyfriend or this or that, the dog ate my homework. But you tell they didn't give a shit. They wanted all the benefits of being on a cadet program, which was, the extra money and the prestige. They wanted all that, but they didn't want the hard work. But more than anything, they did not want the accountability. Accountability was something they were terrified of. If you've got a relationship with a man, you can control him, through sex or through whatever. But if you've got if you've got no relationship with your boss or the person at work who's grading you, then what leverage have you got? You've got none. It's strictly pass or fail. And this terrifies women, absolutely terrified. Certainly did then and subsequently that I saw. So that was it. So I flunked them. Said, look, if you can't hand the paper and you can't be bothered, I'm thinking that I was doing the right thing here. I'd given them extra time. I'd given them every break, and I'd given them, I'd even sat down with a couple and say, look how bad this work is, what you had to do, and even giving them effectively the answers. Still, they couldn't do it. So I flunked them, and I had then, within seconds of flunking them, the CEO, whoever it was around and coming around to my office, red in the face, veins sticking out in his head. Billy Bump, I fucking told you to pass the checks, okay? Now you're going to fucking pass it. Do I have to get someone else? What, do you want the job here or not? And so I was being threatened with being dismissed just if I didn't grade girls as a pass, even though they 100% totally failed. So anyway, I didn't want to get fired, and I was a young guy, and I said, oh well, that's what he wants. And so I wasn't going to argue with him. So, okay, fine. And so I passed them all. And then the guy gets up, this same idiot gets up at some all-in meeting saying, well, I'm so proud of our cadet, our female cadet trainees. They've passed with flying colours. Wow, isn't this incredible? It shows what we're really stepping forward here at this company and bringing women into and that was sort of, again, my first experience with it. Now, it went on from there where, as I moved up the food chain, and by now I'm into my late 20s, and especially in the technology industries, they were fanatical in inserting women to those sort of industries, very white collar and nice places to work with lots of, free nice lunches and all that sort of thing. So, and these women that were being hired into these companies were nice. Some, I mean, you get exceptions. Some were quite industrious, but many were not. And I would say very few were industrious, and most of them were parasites and hangers-on. But once you get this influx of women where there are no standards, they're just appointing women to roles that they in no way have they meritoriously earned, in no way. And then it has knock-on effects, like the bosses see all these women and think, well, why can't I hire some hot piece of ass and go fucking her on the weekend? And so all that comes along with it. So there's a whole lot of other baggage that comes along. And I worked, one of my colleagues, VP of another division, and he's a good-looking guy and everything, and worked out. But he used to hire these little sort of snotty blonde chicks and screw them, and he thought, well, why not? If I'm forced to hire women that shouldn't be hired, why don't I get some action out of this for myself? So again, it has a wider corrupting influence. Now, these women, they had to be evaluated, and some of them reported to me, so I had to do the evaluation. And it was always a difficult time, because these women hated being, not that anyone really likes being evaluated, but the hardest workers, the best performers, they don't care. But the women weren't in that category. They were never the best performers, certainly not the hardest workers. They might work hard at just running around in circles, but that would, or work hard at attending as many meetings as they could get into. But when it came to evaluation time, these women would open up with, I know you hate me. I know you hate me. You hate me, don't you? And you're going to give me a bad evaluation because you hate me. And you look, what? Talk about passive aggressive. So, well, no, Billie Jean, I don't hate you. And that's very silly of you to say that. But I will be evaluating you in the same ways anyone and everyone else would be evaluated. And so let's get on with it. Now, if you don't want this job, there's the door. And so I wouldn't put up with that nonsense. And they tried. This was pre the days when you believe all women that they're raped and everything. So it's pre that. And so they would try, but every trick in the book. Oh, you're just doing that because you don't like me. Oh, you're just doing that because I'm a woman, and all this. The whole barrage would come out, and it probably worked to some extent because ones that I would have been maybe a bit more brutal on. I didn't want to have to run the gauntlet of them going to the CEO or something and saying, "Oh, Billy Bob hates me," and that's so I probably gave them a softer evaluation than may otherwise, given their work was so fucking piss poor. There's even a woman that used to arrive at 10 in the morning, then she'd be putting on her makeup and fucking around, and then at midday she'd go out for lunch, and then she'd be on the phone organising a social calendar for the night, and she's fucking useless. And but she fancied herself as being a senior executive that should have a seat at the table, but she was fucking hopeless, lazy, stupid. And now, her claim to fame was she knew a lot of people in good social circles. When a new nightclub in Sydney would open up, she'd be getting an invitation for the opening night. And she'd run around telling everybody that. In fact, that was one of her opening lines, one of the evaluations I had to do. Do you know who you're dealing with? You're dealing with a chick who got invited to, the such and such nightclub on opening night. That was so all through the, certainly my career, I found, again, some exceptions. I found that women are being inserted into roles they're not capable of doing. They don't give a shit, and they expect a free ride, same as they would expect having a rich guy as a lover who they controlled, who showered them with diamonds and gifts and lunch, dinner, expensive dinners and so on. They see their employer really in that category. That's how you're meant to behave. That's how you're meant to be treat them. They see themselves as princesses that are entitled to all these sort of things. And you see many videos online of especially younger women, but older women too, especially minorities. They're the resistance fighting back against the Nazis and the patriarchy. So they're entitled to their jobs and the perks and so on that go with it. But what are you producing? Well, nothing. I'm just an ideological warrior. I do nothing but go to meetings all day. Especially, and this is particularly so, say, women coming from the third world as younger, still school age. And then they go to work, they go, wow, look at all this wealth, and I want to stick my nose right in the middle of this trough and get as much as I can. And I'm a princess, and I'm entitled to be treated with leniency. The idea that some man is going to hold me accountable for doing some work is just beyond comprehension. And so, I was working at one organisation where they had this. They hired this new guy. He's an American. They hired this new guy from America, and he said, I'm going to have to do something about this situation. All the important jobs are held by men, and I'm going to fix this, as if it was somehow a problem. How is it a problem? Can you explain how? I even asked the guy, how is it a problem? If everyone's doing their job, then how is it a problem? And he'd come, his previous employer had been 100% dependent on government contracts. And so, he thought he was a hot shit, but he was a useless fuck. And so he just started getting rid of men, but also creating jobs, especially for women, just putting women in them. The marketing director was a You know, he hires this Yank chick as a marketing director, and he's just giving women all these jobs. None of whom are qualified to do it, but none of whom are being judged or held accountable for results or performance. So let's sort of see where we are today. You know, if I go through some of the best paying jobs in Australia, it's things like women's affairs advisor, advisor for women's rights, advisor for women in marriage relationships, and so on. These are well paid jobs. Do these women do anything? And you look at the research groups that appear before Senate committees in Australia, and they're the people that work there. None of those people you would employ to sweep the floor. Many of them are being paid between $400,000 and $500,000 a year for some vague socialist ideological type bullshit. So this is where we are with women now. That doesn't mean there aren't jobs where women work hard. You know, there's a lady that does all the admin work at a factory, you know, down the road, for example. She has to work quite hard to get through all the work. But that's a real job. It's not the sort of fake jobs that have been created over the last 25, 30 years, 35 years even, to stick women into. And it is, as many people say, it's just daycare for women. They're not real jobs. No one does anything. No one produces anything or creates anything. They just flit around in these silly little girly, you know, dollhouse games. And they think that's actually work. And they're such entitled princesses that they believe that they're adding value and doing real things, whereas in fact it's quite the opposite. How are we going to bring an end to that is the big issue. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback Challenge. Thank you for listening.